insights. So I will give you guys a little snapshot. So I am a native Houstonian. I grew up here. And then in my early 20s, wanted to go on an adventure. So I landed up in Dubai, spent a couple of decades there working in technology. And then in 2017, I made a permanent move myself back to the US. And when I arrived in the LA area, I was looking for opportunities. I wanted to figure out what I was going to do next, right? So my business model was very much tied to the Middle East region and didn't have much relevance here. So someone told me that there's a big conference in Silicon Valley and it's open. And I'd heard of Open cursorily because of Houston. I know the chapter here started in the early 2000s. And I show up at this event and lo and behold, who do I run into? Khwaja, who I knew from Dubai, and we had some common friends. And he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Dubai." I said, "Well, I moved back and I'm in LA now." And the essence was, "Oh, I need to talk to you." So they were having a retreat in Newport and they invited me out and I saw the people and I saw the situation and I met Haris and Kewan and several other folks. And at that point, it dawned on me and said, you know what, how is it that Open doesn't have a chapter in Los Angeles? I mean, this is a huge city. It's very diverse economically. There's a lot of Pakistanis here. And that's the start of that journey. So I collaborated with several other folks in the Southern California region. And over the course of 3 years, we built it up to about 25 charter members. It was a lot of grassroots work. I enjoyed doing it because I really got to know some really interesting people in LA. And that helped me kind of secure my berth, as to what I wanted to do next. And I ended up taking a full-time job at Oracle in a sales role and was doing the Open thing. And then I actually worked with Kewan for a year, which was really interesting. That was a very startup situation, great experience. But decided I had to get back to a corporate role and then ended up at Salesforce. So I handed off the baton in 2020 during the midst of COVID to Mohammed Shahzad, who you're connected with. Again, a very prolific individual, now CFO for a very large space company. And LA seems to be kind of holding its own. They've maintained their situation. I decided during COVID that I wanted to move back to Houston for family reasons and just to be reconnected to the community I grew up with. So that's how I ended up back here. And since I'm working remote, it didn't really matter where I lived. So there was a big upside for me there. As far as TechSheck is concerned, TechSheck, there's a man behind the scene, and I have to give him full credit for helping me incept this. I became very friendly with a gentleman in Orange County named Yusuf Siddiqui. And we were sitting around in the early days of COVID, and he's like, Faruk, you got this Open thing going on. And I had recently gone to the Invest in Pakistan conference, the first one in 2019, and met, really bright young people, right? So I met Faruk, who is, the company's name is escaping me. And then there was the two young ladies that were Sayed Khani, who were doing the remote doctor, treatments and things like that. So I said, you know what? Nobody was really putting any highlight on these folks and what they're doing. And end of the day, this is a real positive situation for Pakistan. They're trying to raise money. They're trying to build a business. They're going to hire people. It's going to bring more of a tech stack to Pakistan. So I started with the first video, and Yusuf was the one who helped me incept that concept. And we did our first video, and it took off, right? It was like, everybody's like, oh, wow, this is awesome. We didn't know this. So fast forward now, we've just hit 120 episodes. So what I do is I just continually look out for new and unique folks and concepts that are coming up in Pakistan and try to highlight them. And the mission to date has only been to provide these people a vehicle where they can have a short video-based discussion with me, and then that can be circulated out so people can get the context of what they're trying to do. Some thoughts on what's going on now is I think there's a bit of an awakening in terms of the mix in Pakistan, right? So you have a very large population under 30 years old. You have very deep mobile / data internet penetration. And there is, I guess, a knowledge basket, the STEM thinking, the way we operate. There's a lot of similarities to us in terms of cross-border, in terms of India, right? So all of this, you're starting to see bubble. And I think there's been always, and I learned a lot about this through TechLogics and Kewan also, by being engaged on the ground there and seeing what's going on. And what I ended up starting to understand is there's a nascent tech evolution going on. And the real trigger point for what's happening now, in my opinion, is Kareem. So when Kareem came into Pakistan, Mudassar and Magnus, obviously Mudassar had ties to Pakistan and was passionate about that. And then when the exit happened, you now have this maybe a couple of dozen millionaires, right? And they've got a great branding recognition. So they get out and start spreading seeds around and setting up their own ventures because they've been through this whole process. And that started to proliferate. And then the capstone was when you had people like Atif Awan, and you obviously had early day folks like Kulsum and Misbah, and you had Rabil and Ali Mukhtar, and these people who started to see, hey, there's something going on here. And then they started to really pump effort into that ecosystem, right? So what I've learned and seen is there's a lot of stuff going on there that you'll look at and go, does that really make sense? But then if you look at that marketplace, so for example, the biggest play that I'm seeing continually is intermediation of distribution. Pakistan has the most unusual distribution environment. I think they have over 15,000 product distributors, and this wholesale system doesn't really exist. It's more like distribution to end user point. People are trying to disintermediate that. There's a lot of money being pushed into that. Then you have folks that are trying to look at the B2C space. So you got people like Munib, who figured out, and the funniest thing I'll give you just a little thought process around Munib is I asked somebody and say, hey, he goes, this is a very intelligent guy who lands up in Pakistan, and he's there for a few weeks. And he goes, Faruk, do you know Baikia is a noun in Pakistan? He goes, you don't deliver, pick up, you drive nahi bechte hain, Baikia karwate ho, right? So it was really interesting. So those are some of the things that you're starting to see, and they're spawning out a lot of younger folks that are smart and want to take the risk. And then on top of that, Atif and company have done a great job of starting to shine a light on Pakistan. And I think, now, as you may remember with Mamoon and Kleiner Perkins, there was a very bright light shone on Pakistan, and some big folks have started coming in. And now we just see Sequoia stepping in behind Tanya and Khurram. So I think it's a really positive momentum effect. The problem is you got to separate it from the noise. There's a lot of noise in Pakistan politically right now. That's just going to happen. But I don't think that precludes the activity in Pakistan and people starting to realize that, hey, we don't need to have a physical factory, brick and mortar to export goods to become wealthy. We can export knowledge, and we have the ability to access this knowledge, build on it, and grow on it. So I'm very bullish still on what Pakistan has to offer from this space. And if I just look at the quantum in terms of numbers, right? So if we look at India, India is a $200 billion export market for technology and technology services, right? I think Pakistan just hit 3 billion. We are 1/6 of their population. So I don't want to make it too rudimentary, but let's just do the numbers, right? So could we achieve a $30 to $40 billion export status? Why not, right? I mean, everything is there. You've got the infrastructure and the capabilities to do it. It's just that we've got to keep moving down that track. And we've got to know that it's high risk, high reward marketplace. There's a lot of political instability. There's up and down, but I don't think that deters from the situation. My caveat is I'm not going to profess to say I'm any level of expert when it comes to media. I feel like what it is I have a story that I'm trying to tell, and I'm using the mediums that are available to me. So my read on this situation is that we as Pakistanis, and I'm going to separate us, right? So there's Pakistanis who are here in the United States and North America, and there are Pakistanis in Pakistan. And I think the way I'm telling the story is I'm trying to appeal to the audience here, right? In a way, and using sound bites in a format that is quick and to the point. We don't get into a lot of fluff. We don't discuss politics. I don't see the real buy-in for that from the Pakistan side of the house, right? Pakistan, we tend to like in Pakistan, there's a lot of drama involved with things. And what that can do is it can take you away from the real story. But then we're human and we're emotional creatures and we like drama, right? So I try to be very, very curt and, to the point. I think what's important is I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, whether people buy in or not, because I got a feeling that eventually people are going to start turning around and looking and doing their research. And I want to be able to be that platform, right? Where let's say someone wants to do some investing or some activity in the third world. Why not Pakistan? What I understand about Pakistan, I will give you one set of context here. This will help you because people might be like, yeah, Faruk, you sit here in the US. What do you know about Pakistan, right? So let me preface this by I helped actually start the operations for a multinational company in Pakistan 30 years ago, which was 3M. Right? I mean, literally shovel, wheelbarrow, roll up your sleeves, get into the muck, right? So I do have context of the challenges that come with that environment and how things are. In terms of the comparatives, I mean, the way I see it, in the US, you have this platform layer that just works, right? You don't have to think about, can I turn the light switch on? Can I get fuel when I need it? Can I get water? Can I find people that are who they say they are, right? It's much easier to sift through that. So your competitive bar is much higher here because you really got to crack the code. You got to figure out what it is those people want. How do you get the messaging out to them, and how do you get them in the door? In Pakistan, you can have a brilliant idea, but if you don't have the operational and the executional capability through people and understanding the system and how to work in those environments, you can die very quickly on the vine. So in my opinion, in Pakistan, it's not so much about the idea. There's a lot of great ideas. You can do a lot of cool stuff, but it's all about the execution and how do you get that done and how do you create a system to get that done. And I think Mudassar and Magnus figured that out, right? And I don't know what their secret sauce was, but they figured out how to take on an Uber-like company, an Uber, and really turn Pakistan, right? And then build out services around that. So what I keep hearing about is it's the culture they created and the learning cycles that they developed and the type of people they were able to attract in. So that's challenging. Munib and Baiki are going through that whole metamorphosis right now, and they've cracked that code. They've figured out how to get their name out there. Now it's the operational capabilities, and I think they've also done a really good job of understanding their end audience, right? The one thing we suffer from a little bit, Samina, is you'll see that there's this hierarchy within the startup world in Pakistan, and you'll have I would say your tier one global players, right? So Harvard MBA goes back to Pakistan, well recognized, comes from money, he can attract in the big VCs, but then he has to build a layer that at the executional level makes sense, right? So he can get those things done. I think we're going to start to see some shifts in that space, and that kind of leads into the airlift story, right? And what happened there. And again, they did a fantastic job of marketing themselves, putting themselves out there, reinventing themselves. Now, what ended up happening, we hear about what's going on, but you know what? I'm actually I'm not happy they failed, but I'm happy this level of failure has occurred because it helps us go to the next level of Genesis in that environment. I think there's a couple of different things. So one is we need vehicles, or to attach ourselves to vehicles that give us credibility across the board, right? And what that is and how that is, I don't necessarily have an answer, but I'll give you an example. So I brought on some folks that were, and the name is escaping me, but they're funded by Bill and Melinda Gates and DFID out of the UK. They're basically an endowment trust strategy that has been focused on Pakistan to help Pakistan with the basics of economic building blocks. And one of the things they did is they helped put up the electronic payment guardrails with the State Bank of Pakistan, so you could do electronic payments in a safe and secure environment. So what I'm trying to say is, in terms of promoting out, is we've got to get stories like that out into the mainstream so people realize, oh, really? So Bill and Melinda Gates have invested in Pakistan and they're helping with this kind of stuff. Then it starts to create more interest from your non-Pakistani environment, in my opinion. I think we're just really challenged at getting those stories out because everybody's so focused on, what the army is doing or who's in the political play and who's stealing money from where, right? That just seems to be the entire bed of conversation that I get looped into often. And nobody talks about, hey, how do we solve this problem? Hey, we've got this going on. There's this nascent issue. I just wish there would be better ways to do that. And I think part of that is getting people from outside of Pakistan to weigh in, because we're great at internally diatribing everything and then coming to no conclusions. But maybe an outside person comes and say, well, did you guys think about doing this or think about doing that? I think that's one way, right? And I think it takes all of us, right, to go out and talk about these situations to people. Like, I'll give Atif a lot of kudos, man. I mean, he got Teddy Himmler involved and he's got that guy involved. And he's doing a great job of, getting out there and getting, but he's very focused on his model and the VC space, right? We need to have people doing this all around. For me, one of the models is becoming much more focused on the ground in Pakistan and then communicating these stories out and starting to build up kind of this library of data, right? That really you can go back, and it's not just the whisper. It's data that you're gathering from the marketplace and that environment. And then you're presenting that data back to folks here in the US, right? Saying, hey, here are the trends in the marketplace, here are where the opportunities lie, here are some of the players in that space. So there's a guy out of Dubai who's doing a great job. It's called Magnet. I don't know if anybody's looked into that. He does MENA, so he does all of Middle East and North Africa. So I think something like that for Pakistan dedicated would be interesting. And then the build out on that could be markets like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, right? Because you have similar dynamics. So that's one idea I've been postulating for a while. Other ideas are, I get a lot of calls from people say, hey, can I invest can we invest $1,000 in that? I don't mind put some. So then the crowdsourcing vehicle, right? And looking about how to set that up, but that requires, again, what that requires is an infrastructure, right? So you need the ability to set up an environment where you can go in, have a diligence team on the ground. You need to make sure that you fall into line with FATCF in terms of funding vehicles. There's a whole regulatory structure that has to be put in place around that. I think it can work. I see them here in the US. I've actually prescribed to a couple of them, and it's pretty cool. And they have an interesting model, where they'll take small ticket investments and they'll aggregate and put it into these companies. And that gives a more democratic view, right, into how to invest into those environments from the US perspective. And it minimizes risk for people. So those are a couple of ways that I think we can continue to perpetuate. And we're exploring those ideas right now. Helping me. So here's what I'm seeing with TechSheck. I don't have 10 million followers, but I have 2,000 very dedicated followers, right? And it seems like we've penetrated this group of people. And I did some analysis on the type of folks. I seem to really appeal to Pakistanis who are involved in the technology industry, right? And like to keep a tab on what's going on in Pakistan, things like that. What I think would help me a ton is and this is the first time we've had the opportunity to do this, right? And now it's recorded and hopefully we'll be able to circulate it out, is as and when people see an opportunity to share this with Pakistanis and non-Pakistanis alike as to what's going on in that ecosystem and how we're presenting that layer, all we're going to do is help people get more plugged in and engaged with what's going on here, right? And that would be, in my opinion, very, very helpful. It's not the most scalable way to do things, right? And I get that, but I also realize that you want to build a believer at a time, right? And then have them become a believer and continue to propagate what you're doing. So whatever the open network can do to help from that perspective will be great here. Thank you for taking out the time to hear the story, and I appreciate you listening to what I have to say, and I hope it makes some sense. If there's one takeaway everybody can have from this and spread that word, end of the day, I like to be a charitable person, but boy, do I want to see more people learning how to fish vis-a-vis giving them fish, right? That's the last thing that I would lead to. So let's keep propagating that.